But first, I must have a little assistance from the audience. Ah, there's a nice-looking young man right there.
Yes, they mean you, Jim.
Oh, not me, you, Bud.
Me?
Go on, Bud. It sounds exciting.
We interrupt this program to bring you further details on the shooting of President Kennedy. After the shots were fired and the president was seen to slump over and Governor Connolly was hit, the motorcade sped on toward the hospital. It took them perhaps 5 minutes to reach the ambulance entrance of the hospitals. Reporters there say the president was lying flat on his face in the car. A man and woman were seen scrambling on the upper level of a walkway overlooking the underpass from which they believe the shots were fired. Lawrence O'Brien, who is the presidential aide, said he had no information on whether the president still was alive. There are fears that perhaps the shots might have been fatal. There are no details as yet. Mrs. Kennedy, who cried out when the shots were fired, blood was seen on the president's face, was weeping and trying to hold up her husband's head, even when reporters first reached the car. Governor Connolly of Texas was wounded. He received shots about the body. He, too, fell over. He also was raced to the same hospital. We repeat, as President Kennedy's motorcade was going through downtown Dallas today, what sounded like 3 shots were fired. The president slumped over. Governor Connolly of Texas slumped over. Blood was seen about the president's head. He slumped over, fell to the floor of the car. Police and Secret Service men quickly pulled their guns and rifles, but it is not yet known whether they returned any fire. There are fears that perhaps the shots to the president might prove fatal. He was speedily rushed to the hospital. There are no reports as yet. Please stand by for further details. We return you now to your regularly scheduled program.
A woman's busy life today, her daily aggravations, her hurry-up meals, can cause heartburn distress due to acid indigestion. The answer? Chews. More women than ever now chew chews for quick relief because this wonderful antacid in chewing gum form relieves heartburn fast and thoroughly in a way no solid antacid tablet possibly can. This was proven by the famous Chews X-ray test with a woman as the subject. X-ray motion pictures of the heartburn area were taken. Based on these X-ray movies, we made drawings for television. See how solid tablets, even in fragments, skip right on through? Now see how Chews medications become a continual flow of relief because it's in chewing gum form. That's why Chews really puts out the fire of heartburn. Next time your busy life brings on heartburn, put out the fire with Chews, the perfect antacid for heartburn.
Good night, Bud. Thanks again for a lovely evening.
Well, why don't you just tell me what a dope you think I am? I got it coming to me.
Because I don't think you are a dope.
Anybody who tries to be 19 when they're only 15 and 6 foot tall when they're only 5'7" is a dope.
Well, you know, when you first came to pick me up, I knew you weren't 19.
You mean I didn't fool you at all?
No.
Why'd you even bother with me?
Well, anyone who went to the trouble that you did to impress me must have a lot of imagination.
Yeah?
And not only that, I liked your relatives.
Yeah, well, they are sort of nice. Well, so long, Marissa.
Good night, Bud. Thanks again for the most unusual evening I've ever had.
Just great. You know, I've been thinking, I'm this charming at 15. Just think what I'll be like at 19.
Get in, Casanova.
Well, it was about 4 months ago that I first tried it.
You mean Armstrong One-Step?
Yes, to see how it cleans and waxes floors all in one application.
And what did you find out?
It works.
You bet I use one-step floor care. And not just because I get done in half the time.
Oh?
I like the way it gets my floor clean. Not almost clean, but clean.
It really picks up the dirt.
Does it? Just look at that water. Yuck.
One Step dries to a beautiful shine.
Does it ever turn yellow?
No. Is it supposed to?
You know, my friends are amazed at how long the shine lasts on my floor. And to tell the truth, I'm amazed myself.
Try modern One-Step. It cleans and waxes. One-Step floor care, made only by the maker of Armstrong Floors, has earned the Good Housekeeping seal and is already used in millions of homes.
She moved straight from the farm to Washington, D.C., and suddenly the whole disarmament question became simple. When she smiles, she disarms everyone in sight, including her boss, the congressman. Oh, that's me, William Wyndham. I'm referring, of course, to Inger Stevens, the farmer's daughter. Join the fun, won't you? Tonight at 9:30, 8:30 Central Time, on most of these ABC stations.
I'm Dan O'Herlihy. Doc faces losing Jimmy when he can't prove he's his son to an unscrupulous schoolmaster on The Travels of Jamie McFeeters.
7:30 Eastern Time, 6:30 Central on ABC. President Kennedy has been shot in Dallas, Texas. He was shot while he was touring town with Governor Connally in the famous bubble car. The bubble was down. Both Mrs. Kennedy and Mrs. Connally were in the car with them. 3 shots rang out, and the president slumped forward, and Governor Connally remained seated upright. So far, the latest word is that they are still alive. Mrs. Kennedy, as soon as the president slumped forward, she grabbed him, she cradled him in her arms, and she said, "Oh no," and tried to hold up his head. Then the car was quickly taken out of line and sped to the hospital. The president and the governor were rushed to Parkland Hospital near Dallas, the Dallas trademark, where Mr. Kennedy was to have made a speech. Thomas, the latest word is from Representative Albert Thomas of Texas, and he said he had been informed that President Kennedy and Governor Connally were both still alive after having been shot in the assassination attempt.
Excuse me, Don, we have a tape from Bob Clark in Texas. Can we ask for that round?
Thomas, standing outside the corridor of the emergency room in which both the president and the governor were under treatment, said he had been told that the president was still alive, but was in a very critical condition. Bob Clark, ABC's Bob Clark, is switching by, standing beside in Texas, and we will switch there for a direct report from Dallas.
Presidential motorcade had just passed through heavy crowds in downtown Dallas and was circling through the fringes of the business District when 3 shots suddenly rang out somewhere in the crowd. It was impossible to see from 3 or 4 automobiles back in the motorcade where I was riding with a press pool. Impossible to see immediately what had happened. But the Secret Service pulled out a machine gun and then gave the orders that sped the motorcade at some 60 miles an hour directly to Parkland Memorial Hospital, about 3 or 4 miles away. There was no panic, but shock and, of course, grief by other members of the party who were close enough to see what had happened. When the motorcade reached the hospital, the few reporters riding in the pool leaped out, raced immediately to the side of the president's open limousine. He was riding in one of the White House Cadillac limousines that is carried across the country, used for parades and other presidential processions. The president was lying in the back seat of the limousine, his head cradled in the First Lady's lap. At this stage, there was no official word as to whether Mr. Kennedy was still alive, but he lay motionless on the back seat of the car for some 2 minutes while a stretcher was wheeled out from the hospital. The president was lifted out of the car, placed gently on the stretcher, and wheeled immediately into the surgical area of the hospital. The First Lady followed, holding him with one hand, followed the other members of the party into the hospital. It appeared at this stage that Vice President Lyndon Johnson might also have been struck, though he was riding in a car behind the president. He walked into the hospital, but holding one arm as if he might have been hit by one of the 3 bullets. Governor Connolly of Texas was also wounded seriously, but there is no immediate word as to his condition. The governor lay half stretched out in the front seat of the presidential limousine. He had ridden through the crowds in the presidential procession. Mr. Kennedy had flown from Fort Worth to Dallas and then entered the motorcade at Love Field in Dallas. The crowds along the streets going into Dallas and in the downtown area were extremely large and extremely friendly. A White House press aide riding in the press pool car noted repeatedly the absence of antagonistic signs. There were very few Goldwater signs. I noted one hand-lettered sign held by a young man which said, "I hold John F. Kennedy in utter contempt," but that was almost the only sign in the crowd that indicated any bitterness toward the Kennedy party. The shots rang out as the motorcade had entered an open area just beyond the main downtown business district. It was impossible to determine where the shots had come from. The immediate interest of the Secret Service, of course, was in protecting the president at that stage, while some Secret Service men must have peeled off to try to track down the assassin. The main group of Secret Service men traveling with the president sped on with him to the hospital.
You're going to give me a little more information now. Bill Lord, who is with the presidential party in Dallas, Texas, also has a report from us here. And Bill, I believe you're on the air here with me. Where are you now? Repeating just a moment, Bill. Bill Lord is telling us from the sheriff's office just around the corner from the position in Dallas where President Kennedy and Governor Connolly was shot, that the police have a suspect which they are bringing in, and which the police radio is now announcing in Dallas. Bill, do you know what the president's condition is at the present time? The president and the governor have both been taken to Parkland Hospital about a half an hour ago, and they are still alive. The president is in very critical condition, and a Roman Catholic priest has been called in. Also, every specialist in Dallas and every specialist in the country, of course, will be alerted to be there. The president is in the emergency room, and the governor is also being attended there.
Don. Go ahead, Don. Read whatever you got. We can take
Bill Lord in Dallas tells us that they also have several witnesses down there who witnessed the tragedy this afternoon when President Kennedy and Governor Connally were cut down by assassins' bullets in the famous bubble car of the president's as they toured Dallas on the way to a supermarket where the president was to be speaking. Mr. Kennedy, here is a late reassuring note from Dallas. President Kennedy, according to a member of his staff, is still alive.
From Ron Cochran.
And now here is a report from Ron Cochran.
Thank you very much, Don. I had just returned from lunch where I was called and informed of the tragedy involving President Kennedy. I'm sure that millions of Americans... You can see there's a little confusion here in our studio. I have just returned from lunch. I was called at a restaurant here in New York, advised of the tragedy involving President Kennedy. He was, as you probably know by now, shot along with the governor of Texas in a motorcade in Dallas, Texas, by unknown assailants. So far as we know at the present time, they have not been captured. Now, I'm going to start at the beginning and give you as much information as we have, which, unfortunately, at this time, is not very much. President Kennedy has been shot, as I said, by an unknown assassin in Dallas. He's in a Dallas hospital. The latest unconfirmed report from the emergency room is that he is still alive. Texas Governor John Connally also was hit by the bullets, probably fired by the same gun. We do not know, however, whether it was one bullet or two or more. The two men were riding together in a parade through downtown Dallas. They were in the president's open limousine and were cut down apparently simultaneously, possibly by the same bullet. The president's wife was beside him in the car, and she fell on her knees beside him at the time. Texas Governor John Connally also was shot. It isn't known yet whether he is still alive. When the president was shot, Mrs. Kennedy jumped up and grabbed him and said, "Oh no." The Secret Service ordered the motorcade to speed on to nearby Parkland Hospital. Associated Press reporter Jack Bell says the president and Connally were shot as the motorcade entered a triple underpass which leads to the Stemmons Freeway in Dallas. Bell said that a man and woman were scrambling on the upper level of a walkway overlooking the underpass. Mrs. Kennedy was weeping and trying to hold up her husband's head when reporters reached the car. The president apparently was shot in the head. He fell face down in the back seat of the car. Blood was on his head. Governor Connally remained half-seated, slumped to the left, and there was blood on his face and forehead. In Washington, the White House said it had no information beyond the reports they had received from newsmen at the scene. Both the president and Connally were rushed to the Parkland Hospital. It's located near the Dallas Trade Mart, where the president was to have made a speech. Even at high speed, it took nearly 5 minutes to get the car to the ambulance entrance of the hospital. Representative Albert Thomas of Texas says that he's been informed that both President Kennedy and Governor John Connally of Texas are still alive. That was a half hour ago. Do you have, Ed Silverman, are you in contact with our reporter in Dallas?
Just spoke with Bill Lord a moment ago, Ron. He is there with the sheriff. He merely confirms that both Mrs. Kennedy and Mrs. Connally have escaped uninjured. They are safe. There are no further details as yet on the condition of the president or the governor, and he has just left the phone for a moment to check with the sheriff on the possibility of the capture of the assailants.
Now, just to inform myself, is Bill Lord at the hospital?
He is across the street from the hospital with the setup that the sheriff has put into effect there.
Well, evidently they are getting things organized to the best of their ability, so that perhaps very soon we'll be getting more comprehensive information.
We certainly hope so. In a condition like this, there's a great deal of confusion when things first are getting underway. I'm sure they're getting squared away down there, and as soon as anything fresh comes in, we'll get it right to you, Ron.
We have this word here from the Associated Press. President Kennedy was given blood transfusions today at Parkland Hospital in an effort to save his life after he and Governor John Connally were shot in the assassination attempt. Now we'll go through some of the other wire service information which has reached us here. Representative Albert Thomas of Texas said that he was informed that President Kennedy and Governor John Connally are both still alive. That was more than a half hour ago. We had some information regarding the persons who possibly might have fired the shots that struck the president and the governor. It says, according to the United Press International Service, at the top of a hill, a man and a woman appeared huddled on the ground. In the turmoil, it was impossible to determine at once whether the Secret Service and Dallas police returned the gunfire that struck down Kennedy and Connally. It was also difficult to determine immediately whether the First Lady and Mrs. Connally were injured. Both women were crouched down over the inert forms of their husbands as the big car raced toward the hospital. Mrs. Kennedy was on her knees on the floor of the rear seat with her head toward the president. The Senate in Washington has recessed. It said it was doing so pending developments in the shooting of President Kennedy in Dallas. Now, this is the latest picture received, taken just before the assassination attempt of the president and his wife as they rode in the Dallas motorcade. When he was hit, Mr. Kennedy was standing up. He fell back over the seat of the car, and Mrs. Kennedy immediately bent over him, cradled his head in her arms. Her cry of, "Oh no, oh my God," was the first realization of the reporters on the scene what had happened. We'll show you more pictures as we receive them. These pictures come into our ABC News headquarters here in New York by wire, and we'll undoubtedly be receiving other pictures from time to time. The photograph was taken as Mr. Kennedy applauded when his wife was introduced at a Chamber of Commerce breakfast in Dallas this morning. That's the most recent picture that we have. This was this morning at a Chamber of Commerce breakfast in Dallas. That's the picture that you see now. Now, simply to recap, and we're going to stay on the air here in an emergency circumstances. I'm sure you can see everybody poured into the studio the minute that that word came. We're going to keep the air here to bring you any late news as it arrives. But just to recap the information that we have thus far, President Kennedy and Governor Connally of Texas were shot by unknown assailants, would-be assassins, as they rode in a motorcade in Dallas, Texas today. The president is said to be in critical condition at the hospital. He evidently was shot in the head. We do not know any more than that regarding his condition at this time. We expect to receive it hopefully within the next few minutes. Some information from the hospital as to his condition. We understand that a priest was called to the hospital, although that does not necessarily mean anything too discouraging. It be more or less routine for a priest to be called under such circumstances, and it does not necessarily mean, of course, that the president's condition is so bad that they feel that last rites must be administered. Mrs. Kennedy, incidentally, apparently is safe, and Mrs. Connally also. Both women disappeared into the emergency section of Parkland Hospital to await the news of their husbands. Outside the emergency room in a buff-walled hallway, anxious members of the White House staff gathered, including Major General Chester Clifton, the military aide to the president, and Brigadier General Godfrey McHugh, the Air Force aide. Also standing by in the emergency is Mrs. Mary Gallagher, the personal secretary to the First Lady.
Take one.
Although Dallas is regarded as a center of strong political opposition to President Kennedy, and of course it was only recently that you'll recall that Ambassador Adlai Stevenson was more or less personally attacked by a group of radical rightists in Dallas after he had addressed a group there. The heavy street crowds between Love Field Airport and the scene of the shooting apparently was overwhelmingly friendly. There were numerous welcome Kennedy signs, but a few were anti-Kennedy.
Ron, excuse me for interrupting. About the only thing fresh that Bill Lord has to report, he is with the sheriff there. They are now interrogating some 6 witnesses to the shooting. There's been no announcement made as to the details, but the sheriff is speaking to 6 people who claim to have seen the shooting. He has them inside. Just a moment, Bill's coming. There are now 12 eyewitnesses, but no indication as to who might have done it. Is that right, Bill Lord?
No, keep it.
While Ed Silverman...
Indication, some of the witnesses have indicated that, as to a description of the man, that he is a white male about 30 years old. That's about the only thing they have to go on now, Ron.
Well, now, this is this the man that they are reasonably sure fired the shots, or do you know that?
Yes, the witnesses say that they saw a white male, approximately age 30 in police parlance, fire the shots, but there have been no details. They're still being interrogated.
We will have to find out, of course, how far away this man was and what position he had for firing the shot. It's most unusual, incidentally, that such a thing could happen because of the unusually tight security measures that are ordinarily taken by the Secret Service who guard the president. And normally, any vantage point, a rooftop, and windows which command a parade route are carefully scrutinized and carefully guarded, and men are usually posted on rooftops along a parade route, particularly if there is any reason at all to suppose that there might be someone in the area who would have such ideas as assassination in his mind regarding the president. These precautions, of course, are taken by the Secret Service for all presidents, as they have been for many years. Just to explain what we are attempting to do here, we, of course, because of the emergency circumstances, cannot take you by picture directly to Dallas at the present time. We are setting up facilities to do that and will as quickly as possible, but it is technically impossible to do so right at this present time. Before very much more time elapses, however, we hope to be able to take you directly to Dallas for some on-the-scenes reports from there. In the meantime, we will have to maintain contact with our reporters there by telephone and by whatever other means to bring you the news as it comes through. We have further word here that throughout the parade, the president, before the shooting, was confronted with the evidence of anti-administration feeling in Dallas. Now we have word that we can switch directly to Dallas. We take you now to Dallas, and I'm not sure who your reporter will be.
Is that audio on here so that Ron knows what he's saying?
You're talking. We're showing the picture. We're going to show you now.
I can't see the monitor.
We're going to get you. Just take the picture, Jimmy. This is from Dallas, Texas. Come on, Freddie. Come on. Let's go. Hey, get the video here.
Have I got audio here?
Yes, you're on. You're on the air. You're open, you're on.
I understand that I am still on the air. I was not quite sure whether you could hear my voice. But you are now receiving a picture directly from Dallas. I'm not sure what you're seeing there. This is one of the speakers at a meeting where the president appeared this morning. We are, of course, operating at the present moment under extreme emergency conditions, and we must apologize for not being able to, at this time, bring you direct pictures of the scene of the motorcade where the incident occurred. That, of course, will be forthcoming later. It's a matter of sufficient time elapsing so that the film can be processed.
Of our God. Will you bow your heads? Draw near us, O God, and sustain us with thy presence, and grant unto us wisdom, strength, courage, to live in keeping with thy law, and to live as free men. Amen.
Dr. Dickinson, the pastor of one of the largest Methodist congregations in the world. The word was not given to the crowd, but we understand that the president is dead. This we do not have an absolute confirmation on, but this is the word that we have. As we said a few minutes ago, he apparently died in the operating room at Parkland Hospital, which is the city-county emergency hospital here, located about 1.5 miles from this building. The president and his party have been in Texas now since yesterday. They arrived in San Antonio, then to Houston, then to Fort Worth last night. He walked into a big crowd of some 6,000 to 8,000 this morning in a parking lot in downtown Fort Worth. The fears here were that had the president had a problem in Dallas, it would have been at the airport upon his arrival. But nothing went wrong there. There were some pickets, there were some demonstrators, but the president, in his charming manner, moved into the crowd with his wife by his side and greeted and shook hands for quite some time there at the airport. Then, and again, we go back to this business of here, we have been forecasting rain in Dallas for the last couple of days, and this morning was one of those dreary mornings. There was fog, there was rain, the clouds hung low, and the weathermen had the forecast that this would hold through this afternoon. But then as the morning wore on, the clouds broke away, and when the president's big jet set down right on schedule at 25 minutes before the noon hour Central Time, the sun was bright, the crowds were out, the bubble plexiglass cover for the president's limousine was put away, and the president and his wife and the governor of the state of Texas rode in the open car. All went well past the airport, down Mockingbird Lane to Lemon, down Lemon Avenue to Turtle Creek on into Cedar Springs down to Harwood, the crowds out to see the president, then down to Main Street, up Main, and just as the presidential motorcade started to enter the triple underpass at Houston Street, shots rang out. The president, as we have it now, mortally wounded. The governor of Texas, John Connally, who served as Secretary of the Navy in Mr. Kennedy's cabinet when Mr. Kennedy first assumed the high office, is wounded. He was shot in the chest. A Secret Service agent whose job it was, as with his others, fellow agents, to guard the life of the president, killed instantly. 3 shots fired and 3 people hit. The president apparently dead. The governor of Texas wounded. We don't know how seriously. A Secret Service agent killed on the spot. This is not confirmed, the death of the president. We have it on what would normally be good authority. But until the word officially comes, there is no way to know. The crowds have emptied now, and this big market hall that was to have been the site of a festive day for the president, for his wife, and the vice president and his wife, and the governor and his wife, and the many Texas congressmen, now being emptied, and most of the meals left untouched. There had been a rhubarb here for a couple of weeks over who would sit at the head table. And finally, At the last minute, a protocol expert was called in, and the head table seating arrangement became final as of this morning. Rift has existed for a long time in the Democratic Party in Texas, and this rift, the Democrats will tell you, whether they be conservatives or loyalists or liberals or moderates or whatever faction of the Democratic Party they belong to in Texas, they all say that this is just an inter-party fight and we can all get together when the president comes to town. Well, finally they did get together. The big bone of contention had been whether or not Senator Ralph Yarborough, who is considered certainly in the liberal wing of the party, would be seated at the head table. He does not get along too well with Vice President Johnson or with Governor Connally. The word was that last night the senator refused to ride in the motorcade in the same car with Vice President Johnson. But today, all was to have been pretty much peaches and cream, as it were. They were all going to sit at the head table and break bread together on this Friday, the 22nd of November. And then, before they could ever reach this market hall, the word is that the president has been killed, that one of his agents is dead, and the governor of Texas is wounded. From the Trade Mart in Dallas, Texas, this is Eddie Barker.
Go ahead, Ron, talk.
You heard that report direct from Dallas, Texas. To repeat what was said earlier in the report from Dallas, there is a report that the president has died. However, we must emphasize that this report has so far been unconfirmed. And that report came in a few minutes ago and has not been confirmed thus far. And so we are inclined to disbelieve it. We certainly hope, of course, that it is not true. The president was given the last holy rites of the Roman Catholic Church. A Catholic priest who helped perform the last rites said he did not believe the president was dead at the time. The sacrament was administered shortly before 1 o'clock.
Ron,
Yes,
Bill Lord briefly reported from the sheriff's office in Dallas, and he confirms that the sheriff's office say that there were 4 shots fired, that a Secret Service agent was killed, which indicates the deadly accuracy of these shots. 4 shots fired, 1 agent killed, and both the president and Governor Connally fell by them. Either they were awfully close or were using rifles, it would seem.
It has been confirmed that the Secret Service agent was killed.
Yes, by the sheriff's office in Dallas. And there's also an indication that a young man was taken into custody by the sheriff's office for questioning. He is a suspect.
We have a report that an assistant to Governor Connally said he talked to the governor in the hospital operating room, which is the same operating room apparently where the president was taken. He said the governor was shot just below the shoulder blade in the back. He said he asked Connally how it happened, and he said, "I don't know. I guess from the back they got the president too." Mrs. Lyndon Johnson said after a visit to the emergency operating room that the vice president is fine. She was taken back into another first-floor room where Johnson originally had gone. Asked if her husband also had been wounded. She shook her head negatively. She said he had not been. Secret Service men pushed reporters away and permitted no more questions. Of course, you can imagine the confusion, the emergency circumstances, the confusion that must exist around that hospital. Now we understand that we are ready to switch to Washington for a report from there. We are ready to go to Washington. Come in, Washington. We are ready to switch to Washington for a direct report from there, but for some reason, under the circumstances, we seem to be having a little difficulty with that, which I'm sure will be cleared up in a moment. Come in, Washington. We were told from our control room here in New York that Washington was standing by with a report, but we've been unable to reach them at this moment. I'm sure that in a matter of seconds, perhaps in another minute or two, we will be able to reach Washington. Did you have something else, Silverman?
I just thought we might recap for those who probably heard about it just a few moments ago.
I think that's a good idea.
It happened that the president and Governor Connally were shot on their motorcade as it entered an underpass while going through downtown Dallas, and When the shots were first fired, there were thought to be 3. That later was confirmed there were 4 shots. The president fell over face down. Governor Connolly apparently was wounded in the body. He fell forward. Mrs. Kennedy leaped up and cried, "Oh no," and tried to hold the president's head up. Blood was seen on the president's head. And a Secret Service agent apparently was shot by one of the assassin's bullets as well. And of course, you have them from there on.
Thanks very much, Ed. In case you did join us late or had not heard the news, those are the facts so far as we know them up to this time. And I'm receiving word now. We have received word that 2 priests who were with the president have reported that the president is dead. Now here again, we must emphasize that this is not an official announcement. It has not been announced by the White House or anyone in the official party traveling with the president. But the Associated Press quotes 2 priests who were with the president, stating that he died from the bullet wounds or wound inflicted upon him by a sniper. We have to assume that it was a sniper who fired from a considerable distance. The president was given the last rites of the Roman Catholic Church at about 1 o'clock Dallas time. And at that time, the first reports were that the president was still alive. However, this latest word says that the priests were under the impression the president was dead at the time the last rites were administered. Now, we, of course, are going to keep the air here, and we will bring you whatever reports come in as they come in from the wire services, from our reporters on the scene, and from Washington and Dallas directly. We will be going to Washington before long for a direct report from there. Ed Silverman is sitting here beside me. He has a telephone to Dallas and is in touch with our reporter Bill Lord, who is at the hospital and has been in touch with people at the scene. Ed, is there anything new there?
No, there is nothing new, Ron. Bill left the phone to check with the sheriff's office. He did confirm the death of the Secret Service agent, the fact that at least a dozen eyewitnesses have been brought in for interrogation, and the fact that 1 suspect has been picked up. He is in there being questioned now. There have been no details. Everyone is being very close-mouthed in the sheriff's office. And, of course, there's a great deal of rumor. Bill mentioned a great deal of rumor, as is understandable at a time like this. So we would hesitate to pass any of that along. We'll stick strictly with the facts as we get them.
Thank you, Ed Silverman. Now, we're going to try again to switch to Washington and Edward P. Morgan. But at the moment, unfortunately, you are not hearing him. We will get that problem straightened out shortly. We have a report that Senator Edward Kennedy, the president's brother, was presiding over the Senate today when word came that the president had been shot. An aide informed him, and he rushed out of the Senate chamber. Attorney General Robert Kennedy, the president's younger brother and closest advisor, was having lunch at home when the word came of the shooting. The president's personal secretary said the Attorney General was remaining at the Kennedy Hickory Hill estate in McLean, Virginia, awaiting further word. Newsmen carried the word to House Speaker John McCormick at a luncheon table in Washington. He said, "This is terrible. All I can say is that it is a terrible thing, and all Americans of all religions and faiths are praying for the president and Governor Connolly." Now,
I'm just thinking of all the people who...
Now, we're receiving a report here. The United Press reports... The United Press reports that the president died at 1:35. That would be 1:35 Eastern Time, I presume. That would have been about 1:35 Central Time. That was only about 2 minutes ago. Now, that, again, is a United Press International report. It is not attributed. We do not know whether that is an official announcement by anyone in the Kennedy party. We have another photograph of Mr. Kennedy in the motorcade, which was taken minutes before the assassination attempt. This is a still photograph of the president in the motorcade. You see he's riding in an open car, and we're informed at the time that the shots struck him, he was standing in that car. Unfortunately, apparently making a good target for the sniper, who was hiding somewhere and may have fired from a considerable distance, probably with a high-powered rifle, considering the accuracy with which he shot. And also the fact that one of the Secret Service agents was killed. The Secret Service agents normally walk directly beside the car on either side. We do not see any in this photograph, but usually 2 or 3 Secret Service agents will walk on either side of the car so that they are there to spot anyone who looks like a troublemaker. Government sources now confirm. We have this from Washington. Government sources now confirm that President Kennedy is dead. So that apparently is the final word, and an incredible event that I am sure no one except the assassin himself could have possibly imagined would occur on this day. The President and Mrs. Kennedy had gone to Texas in a speaking tour, which was to be, in effect, more or less the beginning of the President's 1964 campaign. It was a trip in which it had been hoped he would bring the various dissident forces in the Democratic Party in Texas together and heal up some of the political wounds that had existed there. Instead, it ended in tragedy with the President's death. We have no word as to the condition of Governor Connally, although of Texas, who was also shot, although evidently he was not as seriously wounded and apparently is still alive. The President was shot in the head. Ed Silverman, do you have further word?
There is a report from Dallas. One of the TV newsmen covering the motorcade says that he looked up just after the shot was fired and saw a rifle being withdrawn from a 5th or 6th floor window of a nearby building. So apparently it was caused by rifle fire. Here's another report, Ron, which just came in.
This one says Senator Ralph Yarborough of Texas, a Democrat, talking only a few minutes before... We are now going to bring you an audio report, that is a voice report, from reporter Bill Lord in Dallas. Come in, Bill Lord.
Hello, Bill Lord, are you there? Come in, please, Bill Lord. Bill was at the other end of this phone a moment ago. He has been at the sheriff's office. Apparently, he had to leave the phone for some urgent announcement. We had hoped to bring him to you now, but apparently Bill Lord has left us. We will bring him to you as soon as he comes back to the phone. Now back to you, Ron.
Thank you, Ed. Senator Ralph Yarborough of Texas, talking only a few minutes before to newsmen, collapsed in sobs as he told of witnessing the slaying of the President. Senator Yarborough said he was in the 3rd car behind the President. He said, "It seemed to me that at least 2 of the shots came from our right rear. I cannot say about the 3rd. It seems impossible that there could have been more than 1 sniper. But it seemed impossible to me that there could be even 1, considering the security precautions that are usually taken." To recapitulate some of the information which we've already given you, in case you may be joining us late, President Kennedy is dead. He died in a hospital after being cut down by an assassin's bullet while his motorcade was moving along on the outskirts of Dallas, Texas. Texas Governor John Connally also was shot, but there is no word up to this time on his fate. There was a report that Vice President Johnson also had been wounded, but this was denied by Mrs. Johnson. First word of the President's death came from 2 priests as they left Parkland Hospital's emergency ward where the President was taken. Their announcement brought audible sobs from a crowd of scores of newsmen and other citizens. The confirmation of the President's death came quickly then, shortly after that, from Washington. There is no longer any doubt. The President is dead. The Vice President himself, Vice President and soon-to-be President Lyndon Johnson, somewhere in the hospital, but it's impossible to determine his precise whereabouts right at this time. He's reported, of course, badly shocked by the shooting. He was in the motorcade with the president. Doctors were trying to keep him as quiet as possible. He was under heavy Secret Service and police protection. Throughout the Texas Strip, when Kennedy and Johnson had been in the same motorcade as an obvious security measure, they had ridden in separate cars so that both of them would not be injured at once in the event of just such an occasion. Now we take you directly to Dallas.
Depository building. I headed for there right after the shots. And they weren't letting anyone...
Pierce, excuse me here. We have our tape ready to roll.
You're on the air. You're on network feed.
We are feeding now. Very good. Ladies and gentlemen, from WFA TV in Dallas, what you're about to see is the first eyewitness report that we could line up. This program went on the air in Dallas, Texas, approximately 10 minutes after the president was shot. Then after that, we will have film that is completely unedited that was made, and frankly, we do not know what's on the film. So right now, let's run the videotape of the program this morning with the eyewitness. Let's go. About 10 or 15 minutes ago, a tragic thing, from all indications at this point, has happened in the city of Dallas. Let me quote to you this. And you'll excuse me if I am out of breath. A bulletin. This is from the United Press, from Dallas. President Kennedy and Governor John Connally have been cut down by assassin's bullets in downtown Dallas. They were riding in an open automobile when the shots were fired. The president, his limp body carried in the arms of his wife, Jacqueline, has rushed to Parkland Hospital. And if you'll excuse me if I give some directions and we talk about what we're going to do here for the next few minutes, but Bobby, let's tape this, if you please, particularly the interview with the eyewitness people. It is being taped good. Here's a piece of copy that was rushed to me and was torn off from the United Press in Dallas. President Kennedy has been shot in Dallas, Texas. He was shot as a motorcade left downtown Dallas. Mrs. Kennedy jumped up and grabbed the president. She cried, "Oh no," as the motorcade sped on. An Associated Press photographer, James Algens, 8LTGENS, reports he saw blood on the president's head. The AP man said he heard 2 shots but thought someone was shooting fireworks until he saw the blood on the president. He also said he saw no one with a gun. We were awfully close. Jerry Haynes, as you know, I'm Mr. Peppermint. We were awfully close to being an eyewitness. We were standing on Houston Street between Main and the next street over. Jerry, come in, would you please? And the next street over, we watched the president come by and gave him the applaud that is due the office of the President of the United States. And as he turned left, 2 or 3 shots rang out. We thought they were firecrackers until, I thought they did until the last shot rang out, and we heard people screaming. And we rushed over in time to see a policeman standing behind one of the fire posts, looking around as if for some place to shoot, someone to shoot at. I'd like to remind you here that as the news comes into the newsroom, we will be on the air. We'll have our eyewitness people here in just a moment. Vicki, would you see if they need some coffee or something? These people are awfully shaken up. They come awfully close. They were in the line of fire. Jerry?
I remember, Jay, you said, I thought it was, a firecracker or something like that, and then they followed 1 shot, and then a second or 2 later, another shot, and then another second or 2, and the third shot, and you said the man's been shot at, and we both turned.
No, I said, my God, that's gunshot.
That's right.
No.
And then we turned right over, we were behind Mr. Leely's statue,
right,
and we ran over to the cement wall, and we saw people beginning to scatter in places, and I believe our eyewitness was on the ground.
Chair, would you do me a favor? Would you go check in the newsroom now, and as the men come in from the field, or if they have stories, please let me know, and also get someone to check with, we were supposed to take the feed from KRLD. They may still be doing a feed from there. Check and let me know. And until our news crew gets back in, we will sort of use this studio as our headquarters. These people, and you will excuse me, I don't want to interrupt you. I'm so sorry because I know that you are so upset, but I would like to talk to you for a minute. It's a little bit awkward, so the camera shots will have to fall as they may. I'm going to stand right here and maybe somebody can give me a chair while we're doing this. May I have your name, please, sir?
Bill Newman.
And this is Mrs. Newman?
Yes.
And this is?
James Clayton.
James, and this is?
Billy.
Billy, tell me what you saw and what you felt. What happened to you?
We had just come from left field after seeing the President and the First Lady, and we were just in front of the triple underpass on Elm Street, and we're at the edge of the curve, getting ready to wave at the President. So
you were down under the viaduct, so to speak, weren't you?
Well, we were halfway in between
on the grass.
Triple underpass. We were at the curb when the incident happened. But the president's car was some 50 feet still yet.
In front of you?
In front of us, coming towards us, and we heard the first shot, and the president, I don't know who was hit first, but the president jumped up in his seat, and I thought it scared him. I thought it was a firecracker, because he looked, fear. And then as the car got directly in front of us, well, a gunshot apparently from behind us hit the president in the side of the temple.
Do you think the first gunshot came from behind you, too?
I think it came from the same location. Apparently back up on the mall. I don't know what you call it.
For the benefit of nomenclature, all you folks have gone out under the viaduct, and as you turn, going under the viaduct on the left-hand side, there's some grass. Do you think the shot came from up on top of the viaduct toward the president? Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Not on the viaduct itself, but up on top of the hill, a little mound of ground there, the garden.
How far away would you say that is from where the president was? A couple of 300 yards, something like that?
Well, I have no idea, because I didn't see where the gunshot come from. We were looking directly at the president when he was hit. Mm-hmm. And he was more or less directly in front of us, and we didn't realize what happened until we seen the side of his head whenever the bullet hit him in the head.
Did you see the blood
in the
president's head?
Yes, sir. I seen it. I don't know if my wife did. I seen it.
Oh, yes, sir. It was awful.
It is awful.
That's all.
What kind of work do you do, sir?
I'm a construction worker, electrician.
Is this the first time that you have seen a president of the United States? Did you see him when he was here before in 1961?
No, sir.
Your housewife
Yes, sir.
took the day off to come downtown and see the president?
Yes, sir, we did. We wanted our children to see it.
Mm-hmm. Were you in the line of fire? I noticed, I remember vividly whenever I walked over and looked over the banister there and saw across the street that you were down on the ground so that to keep out of the line of fire. What was the first thought that struck your mind?
Well, I thought it was a firecracker, and I saw the blood, and I had the baby, and I just ran, and I got on top of him and laid on the grass. It just scared me. It was terrible.
Did you see anyone else hit besides the...
Governor Conley was kind of turned to the side, and he grabbed his stomach.
Okay. I'd like to remind you that this is Jay Watson. I'm speaking to you from the studios of WFAA TV in Dallas. The tape that you just have witnessed was played back approximately 10 minutes on our station after the president was shot this afternoon in Dallas. The tape of the eyewitness, there were others. The two people, as you could see, we were in a state of confusion there at the moment, but at least we did have the eyewitness report for you. In case you have tuned in late, government sources in Washington say that President Kennedy is dead. He was shot at approximately 12:35 this afternoon in Dallas, Texas. The gentleman on my left and on your right is Bert Shipp, who is in charge of the photographers in our newsroom. And Bert, you have some film. Just a minute. Bobby, is the film ready to roll yet? Hello. No, they're queuing up the film now that Bert took at Parkland Hospital, as I understand it.
Jay, it's going to start out some brief scenes at the Market Hall, or at Trade Mart, where the president was due to arrive. It's about probably a mile from the scene of the downtown shooting. And, of course, we had no word at Market Hall as to what went on downtown.
Roll the film.
And it was a complete mystery. The police didn't even know. But we knew... As you'll see about halfway through the film, the police went on past the Market Hall area, or Trade Mart rather, and on it to Parkland Hospital.
Bob, whenever you're ready, go ahead and roll and let's see what we got. Excuse me.
Oh, this is a shot. There we go. Here's Market. There's Market Hall. Trade Mart is right across the street from there. They had a big welcome sign for the president there at the corner of Industrial and Stemmons. It says, "Welcome, Jackie." And
now, this was the place where the president was supposed to make his speech.
Here's some a gentleman carrying signs. I guess you'd call them gentlemen. They had these signs. They wasn't causing any trouble. They were run off moments after this, told that there was private property and they couldn't be around there. And they wouldn't talk to us other than they said their signs spoke for themselves. Here's some of the crowd, 450 extra policemen called on duty. Everybody waited anxiously. And waited and waited and waited. Here's the policeman ushering a fellow by the name of Joyner from Grand Prairie back across the street. The boys had their mouths taped up so they wouldn't be able to answer any questions. Now there goes the president on up the hill there. He's been, this is after we found out there was something wrong. And
speeding past.
Yeah, and here's the disappointed crowd left there at the Trade Mart.